Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Austin Peterson here, former presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party. Welcome to the Freedom Report live stream. If you're watching me live now on YouTube, congratulations. You caught me when I'm actually in the chair and able to interact with my audience. But if you're watching me later, you're probably on Facebook. And if you want to catch these streams live and you want to see me give my opinions and chat in real time with other liberty lovers, then don't forget to visit my YouTube page. It's youtube.com/AUGGYP. That's youtube.com/AuggieP. That's me. Usually my live stream schedules run Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday unless there's any extenuating circumstances. Of course, tomorrow night is an extenuating circumstance. I am very proud to announce that I have been invited to speak at my old alma mater, Missouri State University. Of course, when I graduated from Missouri State in Springfield, Missouri, it used to be Southwest Missouri State University. They changed the name after that. But I will be live streaming that event, and just because it's so much easier for me to do so on Facebook, I will be live streaming the actual event tomorrow night, which is February the 9th at 7 p.m. Central Time on my Facebook page. So if you're watching me on YouTube now and you want to make sure you catch that, don't forget to subscribe and get my live alerts whenever I'm live on Facebook at my Facebook page at facebook.com/producer Peterson. Peterson spelled Petersen. That's right, all E's, no O's. It's Danish, yeah? Super. Anyways, so tonight we're going to be talking about a topic that's near and dear to any libertarian's heart, and that is the question of abolishing the Department of Education. Of course, my bias is to abolish, right? When in the course of human events, we have the right to alter or abolish. And don't replace it, right? Because when a libertarian might say, people say, if you're going to abolish the Department of Education, what would you replace it with? And as my good friend Thomas Sowell would say, well, when you remove a cancer, what do you replace it with? And of course, a lot of people are going to get triggered by that because they think, oh, gosh, does that mean that you don't want kids to get an education? Yeah, hell no, we don't need no education. No, we're not all just a bunch of rabid anarchists here, although there are a few, and I might have just triggered them. But no, it's not that we don't think that we need education. It's that we like the concept of decentralization. We like the concept of accountability. And we happen to think, in the grand scheme of things, that if you have local education standards, they are much more accountable to the parents and the teachers and the students. And that is why, in a general sense, libertarians want to decentralize our education system. So tonight, I've got some articles for you. The first thing that we're going to do is lay out how we got the Department of Education. How did we get here? Did we always have a Department of Education? Well, no. Actually, the DOE is a rather recent phenomenon, and the Founding Fathers of the United States did not establish a Department of Education because they believed, like all good libertarians do, that the states probably should have the educational standards set up. That way, we have a laboratory of democracy. So tonight, I will be discussing the birth of the Department of Education, how it came to be. I'll go through the legislation that has been proposed by freedom hero Thomas Massie of Kentucky, who introduced one-sentence legislation. The DOE shall cease to exist, or it shall shut down at the end of next year, and I'll read his bill as well as his explanation for why he thinks it should be gone. And then I've also got a really great article from my good friend Julie Borowski, who wrote her own opinion on why she thinks it should be abolished, which I just happen to agree with her. So I'm going to share my good friend Julie Borowski's article with you, as well as a very interesting story that a lot of people don't know about how the modern educational system that we have, which is usually referred to as the Prussian system. Of course, Prussia at the time, this was the old Germanic kingdom, the old empire, the old Austro-Hungarian Empire, the old Prussian standards of education, how they contributed to the modern American educational system. And I'm going to be reading to you from a passage from a book called The Politically Incorrect Guide to Socialism. So we're going to discuss the beginning of the DOE, why I think it should be abolished, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the what I would consider the infernal roots of the Department of Education, and then we can discuss it. So thank you very much for tuning in to our live stream tonight, and I'm very grateful for your participation. Let's go ahead and get this show on the road. What do you say? So, first story that I've got, and I'll drop this in the live chat for you all to follow along so you can read if you like. Time to abolish the Department of Education. There you go, there you go, there you go. right there. Why do we have a Department of Education? Jimmy Carter's debt to a teachers union. So this is why did it happen? This is the question of why do we have the Department of Education? And the question is, public education existed well before 1980, but an unpopular President Carter wanted the nation's largest union on his side before an election. This is from Reason Magazine. This was written by Anthony Fisher yesterday from the Department of Education. And it says, with Betsy Devos just confirmed as the new Secretary of Education, it's worth taking a look back at the events that led to the creation of this cabinet-level department. Public education, including federal involvement in public education, was a thing in the United States for a couple hundred years before 1979, when Congress narrowly approved the cleaving of the cleaving of a new Department of Ed. So we did have public education before the Department of Education. But the newly created federal bureaucracy was more of a favor to large and powerful special interest groups in the DOC. Yeah, I can see people here that are saying, "Oh no, what are the headlines? The headlines." Oh, okay, I know how you guys are super anal. There you go. The headline's gone. My bad. Let's go ahead and get back onto it. Okay, here we are. Public education was a thing in the United States before the DOE. President Jimmy Carter said that the federal government needs to meet its responsibilities in education more effectively, more efficiently, and more responsibly, as then Jimmy Carter put it. Upon signing the Department of Education Organization Act statement in October of 1979, Carter said, "The primary responsibility for education should rest with the states, localities, and private institutions that have made our nation's educational system the best in the world. But the federal government has gone for too long, failed to play its own supporting role in education as effectively as it could. Instead of assisting school officials at the local level, it has too often added to their burden. Instead of setting a strong administrative model, the federal structure has contributed to bureaucratic buck passing. Instead of stimulating needed debate of educational issues, the federal government has confused its role of junior partner in American education with that of silent partner." So what is he really saying there? He's saying that he thinks that the federal government needs to take a step up and get more involved. Essentially, Carter's argument, similar to the argument that President George W. Bush used to create the bloated, expensive, and ineffective Department of Homeland Security, is that because of all the, quote, bureaucratic buck passing, a new bureaucracy must be created. Creating the Department of Education was Carter's fulfillment of a 1976 presidential campaign promise when he earned the endorsement of the largest labor union in the United States, the National Education Association. As the Washington Post reported in 1980, the NEA gave its first presidential endorsement ever in 1976 when Walter Mondale promised them at an NEA meeting that the Carter administration would form an education department. At the 1976 Democratic Convention, more delegates, 180, belonged to the NEA than any other group of any kind. They've endorsed Carter for 1980 and were a major force in getting delegates to the Iowa caucuses. So you see right there, ladies and gentlemen, direct Democratic pressure and action is what matters. Now look at this. At the convention, 180 delegates were what made an entire federal department. And that's why when people, and I'm just going to spitball here for just a moment, a lot of people say, well, libertarianism is not widely popular. We need a movement of millions. No, sometimes all you really need is a keen, irate minority. And the thing is that 180 people is all it took for them to get an entire cabinet level department. Imagine if 180 libertarians were delegates to the Republican convention and were able to abolish an entire department. I mean, that's power, ladies and gentlemen, that can be held by a very small amount of people. But a very small amount of people can actually make an enormous impact. And that's why it's so important for you to be politically involved. Listen, if you just show up to vote once every 4 years, your vote doesn't matter as much as the people who show up to vote every 2 years, or the people who go to their town council meetings, the people who actually show up in midterm elections, the people who campaign. Your vote matters more when you show up more. That's how the system was initially designed. So think about it. 180 people is all it took in order for them to get this entire cabinet level administration. Is the department then a creature of the NEA? That's true, says NEA Executive Director Terry Herndon. There'd be no department without the NEA. By the time the bill calling for the creation of the Department of Ed had been passed in Congress, President Carter's approval rating was at its nadir, below 30%, in large part thanks to an international oil and energy crisis, contributing to a tanking economy and a national, quote, crisis of confidence. A study of the Department of Ed's creation by Georgia State University found that although the department was fairly low on the list of priorities, President Carter's domestic policy staff did its research, sent people to testify on behalf of the department in Congress, and hoped that their endorsement of the department would help ensure the backing of the NEA and its members for the 1980 election. A section on the Department of Ed in the Cato Institute's Handbook for Congress includes a passage about the lukewarm support from even congressional Democrats for creating the Department of Ed, who were more motivated to keep a Democrat in the White House than to create a new federal bureaucracy. According to Rep. Benjamin Rosenthal, Congress went along with the plan out of, quote, not wanting to embarrass the president. It's amazing that that's how we get cabinet-level administrations. Also, many members of Congress had made promises to educators in their home districts to support the new department. The Wall Street Journal reported the admission of one House Democrat, quote, the idea of an education department is a really bad one, but it's NEA's top priority. There are school teachers in every congressional district, and most of us simply don't need the aggravation of taking them on. Just today, or yesterday, Thomas Massie introduced H.R. 899, a one-sentence long bill which would eliminate the Department of Ed in its entirety by the end of 2018. That's how we get cabinet-level administrations in this country. Nobody wants to argue with the teachers ever because it's like when you have groups of people who are a special interest, and teachers certainly are a special interest, they're always going to argue for their chunk of the federal pie, right? That's why they want to do this. So it is a problem, of course, because right there is the problems of democracy, right? And the only way to combat democracy is with more democracy, which is what libertarians don't really like, right? They're upset with democracy and they sort of reject or eschew frequently the democratic processes. But right there, 180 people is a strong enough block to create an entire cabinet-level administration just because the congressman did not want to deal with all the teachers in every district. How do we get libertarians in every district to be a problem for their congressman so that we become the special interest? How do we become a lobbying group? Well, I'll tell you one way is you can join the Stonegate Institute in our mission to help spread the ideas of economic freedom and personal liberty in your hometown, and that's one way that we're working to make democratic change on the local level. Next is Tom Massie, and here is his explanation for the introduction of his bill to abolish the Federal Department of Education. Thomas Massie, again, he introduced 899. The bill is one sentence long. Amazing! Don't you just love the efficiency of libertarians? Quote, the Department of Education shall terminate on December 31st, 2018. On the day of Betsy Devos' scheduled Senate confirmation for the Secretary of Education, Massie said, quote, neither Congress nor the President through his appointees has the constitutional authority to dictate how and what our children must learn. Amen. Massie added, quote, unelected bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. should not be in charge of our children's intellectual and moral development. Hell yes. States and local communities are best positioned to shape curricula that meet the needs of their students. Schools should be accountable. Parents have the right to choose the most appropriate educational opportunity for their children, including homeschool, public school, or private school. For years, I have advocated returning education policy to where it belongs, the state and local level. And some libertarians don't even want it at the state level. Walter Jones said that, by the way. He was an original co-sponsor. Quote, DC bureaucrats cannot begin to understand the needs of schools and its students on an individual basis. It is time that we get the feds out of the classroom and terminate the Department of Education. The Terminator. Walter Jones is the Terminator, yeah. This is good. Freshman Rep. Andy Biggs says, education of our students should lie primarily with parents, teachers, and state and local officials who know how to meet their individual needs best. Since its inception, the Department of Education has grown into an unrecognizable federal beast, and its policies have helped foster common core across the country. It is time the one-size-fits-all approach by the federal government is ended and authority is returned to the local level. This is terrific. I'm going to finish this here in just a second, but I want to paint an anecdote paint a picture in your mind of what it is we're thinking of. Why do we not want one-size-fits-all curriculum standards across the United States? Wouldn't the uniformity of educational standards in the United States mean that we will all be raised to the same high bar? Well, no, and here's why. There's a really beautiful cartoon that illustrated this once. Again, this is just an anecdote, so go along with me. But it showed a picture of all these different kinds of animals. And there's a bee, there's a snake, there's an elephant, a hippopotamus, a giraffe, rhinoceros, lion, all these different kinds of animals, a fish. And then the educational bureaucrat says, okay, here is your test, animals. Climb this tree. How can a fish climb a tree? Right? How can a hippopotamus climb a tree? The answer is that they can't. So attempting to enforce conformity across the wild animal kingdom of the human species is fallacious, because the idea is that, I mean, they say, okay, well, kids can't do basic math, or they can't do all of this. Well, some people are never meant to do higher maths. Some people are never meant to do higher arts or literature, right? They need to focus on what they're good at, or maybe they need to go to technical school because they're good with their hands, right? I was good with English and literature, the arts, and I was not so good with the maths and sciences. That was not my area of strength, and so I focused. Thank goodness I got out of high school before these Common Core standards got down, or I probably would have struggled in school, because I was extremely good at some things and I was not so good at other things. So there was a bit of a mismatch there. And if there had been Common Core standards when I was in school, maybe I would have thought that I was a bad student. Maybe I would have thought I was pretty dumb because I couldn't have passed the types of Common Core educational standards that we have right now. Now, just because you're bad at math or bad at reading doesn't mean that you're not great at soccer, or maybe you wouldn't be a terrific welder. And that's really the problem that we have with these kinds of uniform educational standards. The Department of Education began operating in 1980. On September 24th, 1981, Ronald Reagan said, quote, "As a third step, we propose to dismantle two cabinet departments, energy and education. Both secretaries are wholly in accord with this." Should I do my Reagan accent? "Some of these activities in both of these departments will, of course, be continued either independently or in other areas of government." No, I probably should stop that. There's only one way to shrink the size and cost of big government, and that is by eliminating agencies that are not needed and are getting in the way of a solution. Now, we don't need an energy department to solve our basic energy problem. Hell yes, Ronald Reagan. As long as we let the forces of the marketplace work without undue interference. The ingenuity of consumers, business, producers, and inventors will do that for us. Why do you guys think this libertarian likes Ronald Reagan so much? Right? Just triggered all these libertarians. No, you must hate Ronald Reagan. Sorry, guys. I just can't. Similarly, Reagan says, education is the principal responsibility of local school systems, teachers, parents, citizen boards, and state governments. By eliminating the Department of Education less than 2 years after it was created, we cannot only reduce the budget, but ensure that local needs and preferences, rather than the wishes of Washington, determine the education of our children. Other co-sponsors of the bill: Justin Amash, freedom fighter; Rep. Andy Biggs; Rep. Jason Chaffetz; Rep. Matt Gaetz; Rep. Jody Heiss of Georgia; Walter Jones of Carolina; and Raul Labrador of Idaho. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Very grateful for all of your support in Congress for the ideals and principles that we hold dear. Very, very good arguments. And I've got another great argument from Miss Julie Borowski. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a look at a chart that I'm going to pull up for you all so that you guys can see the story. And they drop in the live chat. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys the link to the story that I'm getting ready to read as well. Here we go. And this is called Abolishing the Department of Education is the Right Thing to Do by Julie Borowski. This was published back in 2011, and it's no less true today. Eliminating the Department of Ed used to be a Republican standard talking point. In 1980, Ronald Reagan ran on abolishing the federal agency soon after Carter created it. The GOP platform in 96 read that the federal government has no constitutional authority to be involved in school curricula or to control jobs in the marketplace. This is why we'll abolish the Department of Ed and federal meddling in our schools and promote family choice at all levels of learning. Julie says that the Republican Party lost its way. George W. Bush championed no child left behind. also known as the No Federal Bureaucrat Left Behind law. Very good, Julie. Which has massively expanded the federal government's role in education. With a few notable exceptions, such as Michelle Bachmann at the time and Ron Paul at the time, modern-day Republicans have backed away from gutting the Department of Education. Of course, now we have more Republicans supporting getting rid of the Department of Education, which is a very good thing. We're very happy that we have more support for this in Congress. Republicans need to return to their small government roots. We can't solve our budget problems and restore liberty simply by tinkering around the edges. Instead of pledging to fix unconstitutional government programs, we need more elected representatives willing to scrap entire departments. Today's GOP should channel Mr. Conservative himself, Barry Goldwater, who declared that, quote, "I have little interest in streamlining government or making it more efficient. My aim is not to pass laws, but to repeal them." Terrific. And she says that the Federal Department of Education deserves to be on the chopping block. I'm going to pull this chart up for you guys so that you can take a look at it while I'm reading this. Look at this. This is inflation-adjusted federal spending per pupil and achievement of 17-year-olds, and this is the percentage change since 1970. Now look at this. This is spending, right? Now look, this is achievement down here. Look at this. Achievement has actually been going down. The source of this is the Cato Institute, all right, and the percentage change since 1970, just since 1970. Okay, so we started spending massively. Look at that. Not a single change here. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And really grateful to Julie Borowski for pointing that out to us. So I've dropped that in there. You guys can read that as well. It goes on and on, but I want to get to the fun stuff. Don't you guys want to get to the fun stuff? Because the fun stuff is the fun stuff. Of course, the fun stuff is the fun stuff. All right. This is from the Politically Incorrect Guide to Socialism, triggered. But this is a fantastic explanation for the sort of the mindset of our educational system. This is the more philosophical stuff, the history stuff, which I tend to be really nerded. I love to nerd out with this kind of stuff, and I know you guys do too. But again, this is from the Politically Incorrect Guide to Socialism by Kevin Williamson. He's one of the writers for the National Review. And you got to buy the book in order to get this, but it's a terrific book. Get the book, and it will help you. It's the best socialist zombie survival guide that you can really get right there. So check it out. The first mandatory education laws appeared in Germany, Prussia, in the 16th century, 1500s, and the schools were used to impose Lutheran orthodoxy on heterogeneous populations. Martin Luther himself was an energetic advocate of mandatory education as a means of enforcing religious orthodoxy, and the teacup totalitarian John Calvin had similar ideas in Geneva. The Empress Maria Theresa in Austria, another monarch struggling with religious dissent, was quick to adopt the Prussian model and use it to impose orthodoxy. The Soviet Union would later adopt compulsory education for much the same reason, though it was imposing a rather different kind of orthodoxy. The Austrian economist Murray Rothbard quotes Luther's argument for the establishment of compulsory schools. This is Martin Luther's argument. "I maintain that the civil authorities are under obligation to compel the people to send their children to school." Sounds like a lot of Democrats today. "If the government can compel such citizens are fit for military service to bear spear and rifle, to mount ramparts and perform other martial duties in times of war, how much more has it a right to the people to send their children to school? Because in the case we are warring with the devil, whose object it is to secretly exhaust our cities and principalities." Right? And that argument was easily mutated into less religious and more explicitly statist formulation by the progressive thinker Calvin Stowe, who was influential in seeing the Prussian model adopted in the United States. Quote, "If a regard to public safety makes it right for a government to compel the citizens to do military duty when the country is invaded, the same authorizes the government to compel them to provide for the education of their children. A man has no more right to endanger the state by throwing upon it a family of ignorant and vicious children than he has to give admission to the spies of an invading army." Wow. Whoa. Holy crap. I hate socialists. Listen to this. "A man has no more right to endanger the state by throwing upon it a family of ignorant and vicious children than he has to give admission to the spies of an invading army." How dare you say that about your fellow countrymen? And you know what? Here's the thing: is that why didn't at that time, the progressivism and socialism hadn't evolved into modern eugenics, which is what it became, of course, because eventually it became George Bernard Shaw, I believe, who said, the same thing. He said, you should have to justify your reason for existence, and if not, then you can't. Your life cannot be too good for you, so we can dispose with it. We can do away with it. And of course, we saw the National Socialists of Germany doing away with the lies that they saw were vicious, the children of vicious people that they saw, the Jews, and of course the communists and the socialists of Russia and China did away with the ignorant and the vicious. And what was funny too was that not only did the communists enforce mandatory education, but they actually murdered people who were educated, right? They actually, part of dekulakization, to kill all the farmers. So they went out and they murdered the property owning class, but they murdered people who were academics, people who were intelligent. And that's what socialists had to get rid of course, because people who own property are necessarily going to be capitalist. And of course, you've got to get rid of the intelligent class, the elites, because those people are going to probably want to own property as well. The leap from doing war with Satan, who was euphemistically referred to as the enemy, to doing war with the enemy of the state was a very short and brief one. And it illustrates an important point about public education, which that its point is not educating the public. I will repeat, the point of public education is not about educating the public. The point of public education is, and always has been, to make members of the public better and more productive servants of the state. And it is therefore unsurprising that socialists have taken up the cause. President Obama, speaking to an audience of school children, described in some detail how he expects the schools to produce certain students that will serve the needs of the state. Unsurprisingly, he cast the terms in the terms of his own agenda, emphasizing health care, racial discrimination, and job creation. Quote, "What you make of your education will decide nothing less than the future of this country. What you're learning in school today will determine whether we as a nation can meet our greatest challenges in the future." And what Obama is really describing here, of course, it's completely messing up right now. But what Obama is describing, in a sense, I'm going to pop this back up. Let's see if I can go to page 77. Page 77, 69. Sorry, guys, this is what happens when it's live. Every once in a while, this thing just goes down right in front of me. So 75, 76, 77. Here we are. Obama continues and says, "You'll need the knowledge and problem-solving skills you learn in science and math to cure diseases like cancer and AIDS, and to develop new energy technologies and protect our environment. You'll need the insights and critical thinking skills you gain in history and social studies to fight poverty and homelessness, crime and discrimination, and make our nation more fair and more free. You'll need the creativity and ingenuity you develop in all your classes to build new companies that will create new jobs and boost our economy. We need every single one of you to develop your talents, skills, and intellect so you can help solve our most difficult problems. If you don't do that, if you quit on school, you're not just quitting on yourself, you're quitting on your country." Right? And so what Obama is essentially doing is he is describing that the state should have eminent domain over our children. And Woodrow Wilson thought something interesting. This is a little segue. You guys should listen to this. This is a quote from the worst president in all of American history. This is a quote about education by the worst president in American history, Woodrow Wilson. Listen to this. Quote, "We want one class of persons to have a liberal education, and we want another class of persons, a very much larger class, of necessity in every society, to forego the privileges of a liberal education and fit themselves to perform specific difficult manual tasks. We are either trying to make liberally educated persons out of them, or we are trying to make skillful servants of society along mechanical lines, or else we do not know what we are trying to do." So what a fascinating insight into Woodrow Wilson. Education is good for putting people in their place. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, I think that we should abolish the Department of Education. Do I think it's going to happen? Probably not, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't push for it. We should always strive for the ideal. We should always push for the ideal. And then, of course, this is the art of the deal, the ideal. The art of the deal, Donald Trump, always ask for more than you think you can get. Right? And then if you have to fall back for less, well, then you fall back for less. If that means that we can slash the Department of Education, if that means that we can cut the No Child Left Behind programs, if that means that we can gut Common Core by pushing for the abolishment of the Department of Education, I say we do it. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for watching my live stream tonight. Abolish that. I'll abolish Dish. I'll abolish dat. Cash me outside. How about dat? Thanks so much for watching my live stream tonight. YouTube.com/AuggieP to watch them live. If you're watching this again later on Facebook, very grateful. But come on, guys, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Really simple. Hit that subscribe button. Or if you're watching me on YouTube later, of course, give me a like. Share this video. If you're watching it on Facebook later, share it on your timeline. I guess, wait a minute. Timeline's over here. Share it over there, guys. Give it a like and a share on Facebook. Very grateful for you all for participating. And of course, if you want to get one of my cool Make Taxation Theft Again hats, you can do that at threadsofliberty.com. I've also got some cool shirts saying, I want to live in a world where gay married couples can defend their marijuana fields with fully automatic machine guns. See, now that is the ideal. Push for the ideal, and maybe we'll get fully automatic machine guns. Who knows? It's a Donald Trump world. It feels like anything can happen. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to come back every single day to your home for economic freedom and personal liberty at thelibertarianrepublic.com. Stonegate Institute is going to be at CPAC. Check us out. I'll be in Washington, D.C. from the 20th to the 28th, and tomorrow night's live stream will be on Facebook. I'll be at Missouri State University in Springfield, live streaming at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. So watch me on Facebook at facebook.com/producerpeterson, and